Hello and welcome to Voices of the Prophets with me, Rabbi Rafi Mollot, everybody's Rebbe. We are joined in the virtual studio. Oh boy, we've got a star-studded cast over here. We have Ronald from Australia. We have Yaakov and Cliff from Seattle, Washington, and we have Jacob from the left coast. No, well, the truth is Seattle's also on the left coast. But Jacob's in California, and we're very honored to have you all in the studio. We have in the YouTube comments William Allen. We have Liz, Mercedes, Raquel, Tom Averna. Welcome back. It's been a while. And Ronald is in two places at once. He's in the studio and on YouTube. Monique, hello. David Ivans. And a shout out to our channel members. Sephardic One, Monique Laterno, Dr. DTU, Sean Watson, Paul Winder, B'nai Noach Hearts for Hashem, John Volkov, Thomas Jefferson, A. Tim McMullen, Liz, Colin Martin, Nancy, Lynn Bat Noach. It's giving me trouble here. Guella, Rhonda Rains, Alicia Douglas, 92 Vanguard, Abigail Foster, Common Man, Homestead 2016, Fadarecci, T. Bishop, Anthony S. Boris, Richelieu Randall, Susan Walbrand, Elena Yoon, Tom Averna, Janice Brandon, Zachary, Sandy Bassie, Tim Flanagan, Clifford Cohen, Erica E., and David Ivans. Thank you so much for being channel members. It really helps out. Everybody should please, I'll say everybody, do what you want to do, but if you would like to support the channel in a small way, you can become a channel member. You get early access to my content. This live class, for example, is public during the live stream. Then it becomes members only for 1 week. All my YouTube shorts come out a day early on my members only side of the channel. Jacob's asking me if I meant to put the link in the chat. I thought I did put the link in the chat. Is the link not pinned to the YouTube chat? Because it's supposed to be.
It
looks like it is.
That's the YouTube link, not the StreamYard link.
Really?
Yeah.
That's messed up. I don't know how that happened. Let me try that again.
I just put the StreamYard link into the thing.
Oh, you did it?
You just have to pin it.
How do I? Well, I need to see it, and it doesn't seem to be. Oh, it seems that it. Tom says it is there.
Yeah, it is at the bottom of my list. It's the last entry.
Yeah, it's at the bottom because I just put it there.
You put it in, and it came up as me.
I'm on the admin. Sorry.
That's fine. It's cool. I just okay. I switched the pin comment. This series is also brought you by the Seattle Kollel. Please visit their website seattlekollel.com and consider giving a donation to support the Seattle Kollel, providing family-oriented content for the Jewish community of Seattle, as well as learning programs such as this one and other live events in Seattle. Okay, remember to shop ArtScroll using my affiliate link, artscroll.com/Rebbe Rafi, REBBI. artscroll.com/REBBIRAFI. Also, there are a number of people who have given donations through the donation links in the video description, who've given generous and significant donations, and they're much appreciated. If you want me to shout you out, let me know that I should shout you out. I don't want to expose you in case you want it to be anonymous, but definitely appreciate those contributions. Helps out a lot. Okay, now, with no further ado, I'd like to start the class. I'll just, as usual, give my usual invitation that everyone is welcome to interrupt at any time with questions or comments, either in the chat or in the virtual studio. I'll do my best to answer promptly if I Can. Okay, I'm going to put the text up on the screen and we could all get a good laugh. How do I put this text up like this? Okay, so I have a lot of words on this slide and it's so small that it's impossible for you to read. So as I mentioned before, the slides are really for me so that I can remember what I wanted to talk about. I'm not so worried about you reading what's on the slide. I'll let you know what's on the slide. I'd rather the presenter view be larger because I feel like my animated facial expressions are more interesting to look at than static text. But you can give me your feedback if you'd rather the text be larger and me smaller. I could do that too. But again, you don't necessarily need to read the teeny tiny text because I'll let you know what it says. Last week we started the actual text of the Book of Ovadyah. Back over here, so many slides, okay, where it said the vision of Obadiah, thus said Hashem, God, to Edom, and we said really concerning Edom. Thus said Hashem, God, concerning Edom. We have heard a message from the Lord, and an ambassador is sent among the nations. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. And again, we said Obadiah was an Edomite convert to the Jewish people. He achieved prophecy. We talked about that in the first one or two classes about who Obadiah was and how he achieved prophecy, and that he was the axe handle that was taken from the forest in order to cut it down. That he himself would prophesy the downfall of Edom because he himself was an Edomite. Now, last week we explored the identity of Edom, that explaining that these prophecies regarding the ultimate destruction of Edom is not talking about, so to speak, the biblical Edomite nation that lived in the land of Edom or ancient Idumea, south of the land of Israel, but rather it's sort of their spiritual descendants, in that people from the Edomite nation founded the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire and subsequent Western civilization and Christian civilization is an outgrowth of that culture. And all of that is encompassed in the term Edom when we talk about these prophecies and the ultimate fate of this entity that the prophet identifies as Edom. Now, another point that we made is in this verse that we examined last week. It says, we heard a message from Hashem. And we said, who is the we? The we is the prophets. And we identified, by the way, it wasn't last week. I know I didn't give a class last week. I mean, the last class, which happened to have been 2 weeks ago, I think. We have heard a message from Hashem. The we is the prophets. And we identified a number of different passages in Tanakh that speak of the downfall of Edom. And we said it's really all over the place. And that's what's being referred to here, that jointly the prophets have heard from Hashem a message about the downfall of Edom. And we were resisting the urge to jump too far away from this text to look at some of the other places. We may end up doing that eventually, but I'm making attempts to stick to the text more closely, unless I need to go elsewhere. And we said that there's an ambassador sent to the nations. And in this context, when we're contrasting the nations to Edom, that if Edom is Western Christian civilization, the nations who wish to arise and do battle against Edom are the Eastern coalition of Muslim nations, essentially. And that's kind of where we left things off. Now, before we get to the verse 2, I did want to talk a little bit about current events, especially in the light of what we said last week. And this passage, which is too small for you to see, from Ramban's commentary on the Torah. Now, last time we spoke quite a bit about Ramban's commentary on the Torah, and in particular, the section where he comments on Parshat Vayishlach, which is the section of Genesis where Jacob returns from the house of Lavan and he encounters his brother Esav when he returns to the land of Canaan, and that Ramban said that this encounter is emblematic of the interaction between Israel and the Western nations, or the Christian nations, or the Roman Empire throughout history. And he drew many parallels, and we spoke about that at length. And I thought that was extremely illuminating, which is why I shared it with you. Now, just to return a little bit to what we said over there, one of the things we said is that Jacob sent messengers to his brother Esav. And he says, I, your brother Jacob, am returning from the house of Uncle Lavan. And we saw the Ramban identifies a midrash that criticizes Jacob for doing this, where it says, why did you send messengers to Esau, letting him know you're coming? And they likened it to the verse in Proverbs that says, like one who grabs the ears of a dog is one who interferes in a fight that's not his. You know, you see two people fighting and you get in the way, you're going to end up getting harmed, as like one who grabs the ears of a dog is going to get bitten by the dog. And they said Jacob should never have invited Esau to meet him. He should have just let Esau pass his way till he got to the land of Seir, which would become the land of Edom, and not invite him in. And the Ramban likens that to how the Jewish people in the times of the Second Temple invited the Roman Empire to come to their land and be friends with them and help them to secure their borders against their enemies. And the Romans came in and they did what they were asked to do. And then they said, by the way, now we're not leaving and you're going to be a vassal to us. And you're going to essentially be subservient to us. And that led to the subjugation of the Jewish people by Rome and ultimately the destruction of the Second Temple. Now, we said all that last week, and we left off with a question of, like, again, Ramban talks about how the Christian nations have caused so much suffering to the Jewish people over the 2 millennia of the exile. Now, when he was writing, it was only like 1 millennia of exile, 1 millennium, I should say. But we, with the hindsight of more of history, Ramban, who wrote in the 13th century, right? So we, with the hindsight of history, know it got only worse after that. Besides the Crusades, and then later the Inquisition, and ultimately the Holocaust and all the other pogroms and so on, everything the Ramban said was true about what came before him, what happened during his time, and what happened after. And we said a lot about it, and you could revisit that class. And one of the questions we left off is, what about the United States of America? That's been a haven for the Jewish people. And that was another point the Ramban made, that just like Jacob, he sent like these different groups of animals, and they were like spaced out in between, that the troubles that we would endure from Edom over the course of history, they would have periods of rest and periods of trouble, periods of rest and periods of trouble. And also that the way that Jacob divided his camp, and he said, if Esav and his army attack one group, the other group can escape. And he said that's why the Jewish communities are scattered among the different Edomite countries. And in one country, when they make a decree against the Jews, there's another place they could escape to, or the other communities escape, and the Jewish people have continuity. So we said, what about America, that's been a refuge for Jews since its inception? And I made something of a dire prediction that the Jewish community in the United States doesn't have so much longer that they can expect that to be here. Now, we have some current events since that last class, because we had Bibi Netanyahu comes and visits the White House. He's the first foreign leader to be invited to the White House, and he makes this very grand pronouncement that Israel has never had a better friend in the White House than Donald Trump. Okay, and to a certain degree, I think that's kind of undeniable. It's kind of undeniable. However, it's also a little bit ominous because of what we spoke about last time, and the history of Jacob and Esau, and how things begin and how things end. And then Trump says, we're going to take over Gaza. Don't worry, Israel. We got your back. We're going to come in. We're going to set foot. We're going to take care of that area, and we're going to make it into something for all people, an international zone that anyone is welcome, and we're going to develop it, and it's going to be the greatest thing ever. And everyone gets so excited, mostly on the pro-Israel side, obviously, like, yeah, Trump, he's going to, liberate Gaza from Hamas, and we're going to have our best friend, the Americans, right at our doorstep, in lockstep with Israel. And I'm watching this happen, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they have not paid attention to our Ovadyah series. They have not paid attention to our Ovadyah series, because we said that's exactly how things began with Rome in the Second Temple period. And the question we had last week is, how does America fit in to the picture of Edom? And it's playing out right in front of our eyes, exactly the way it did in the Second Temple period. And even our friend Tom, who's in the YouTube live stream chat, made the same comment on that class in the YouTube comments. Like, I hope we're not repeating the same mistake that the Jews did in the Second Temple period. And I hope so too. But it sure sounds to me like it, which is why, okay, that introduces my next remarks. Now, one of the reasons that in the last class I talked so much about the Ramban's commentary to Vayeshlach, aside from the fact that it's relevant, is the fact that I had just seen it. Now, I've spoken about this before, but every week Jews are supposed to read the weekly Torah portion with what's called Targum, which is a translation, traditionally the Aramaic translation, or many people will use the commentary of Rashi, because we're supposed to read the portion with some type of explanatory text, either the traditional translation or commentary. Now, I have been trying to read through the Torah portion each week with the commentary of Ramban. Okay. And I did it last year, and I'm trying to review it this year. And it's much more lengthy commentary than Rashi, and it takes much longer. So while the rest of the world is on the Parsha of this week, we're already up to Yitro, I'm still stuck way back in the book of Genesis. So when we did that last class, I had just gone through the Ramban's commentary on Vayishlach, and I found his comments so relevant to the topic of Ovadyah that I mentioned them in the class. Now, this week, as I'm preparing for this class, I happen to be, and nothing's coincidence, everything is perfect timing, as you could see, I happen to be now in the Parsha of Vayechi, the last Parsha in the book of Genesis, catching up slowly. And again, Ramban, or maybe it was Vayigash, I forgot if it's, no, right in the beginning of Parshat Vayechi, the Ramban drops this bomb. Okay, and I want to share it with you, and that's what's on the slide. Okay, so here's what he says. The verse tells us that Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. Now, I wish there was a way to magnify this for you. I wonder if there is, but I can't figure out a way. I can't figure out a way to do it. But he says like this. Now, I put on the slide the Hebrew and the English. I forgot how to do the little laser pointer thing, but I'm going to read what he says in the English translation here, okay? He says, I have already mentioned that Jacob's descent into Egypt alludes to our present exile at the hands of the fourth beast, which represents Rome. Now, when he says I've already mentioned, there's an earlier place where Ramban mentions that also the descent into Egypt is an allusion to the future exile. And everyone agrees with this, because even when I mentioned to you last week, the four kingdoms, last class, about the four kingdoms that are mentioned all over the Torah, and the four kingdoms are generally understood to be Babylonia, Persia, Media, Greece, and Rome. Okay. Well, what about, and we said it corresponds to the four exiles. What about the exile to Egypt? That was the first one. So the Egypt itself is seen to be a sort of archetypical exile that encompasses all future exiles. And more or less everyone agrees with that. And that the redemption from Egypt will parallel the redemption in the end of days. that to the degree that they'll be compared with one another, and that the prophets say, and I mentioned this also, that the redemption in the final days will overshadow the redemption from Egypt, such that we'll no longer talk about, oh, the miraculous redemption from Egypt, because the present redemption will be so wondrous that we'll forget about Egypt, because we're going to be only thinking about the wonders of the present redemption. So Egypt is seen traditionally as this sort of, again, archetype for all future exiles. And as we mentioned last time, the Ramban makes a lot in his commentary of sort of unraveling how the events that occurred to the patriarchs are signs for events that would occur to the nation on a more macro level. So here he compares the descent to Egypt to the present exile, he says, at the hand of the fourth beast. Now, what is the fourth beast? Again, in Daniel has this vision of these four beasts, and each one is more ferocious than the next. And each of these four beasts, again, represents the four exiles. And the final beast, who's the most horrifying, is the final exile, which is the Roman exile, and it has 10 horns. And then we talked about last week the 10 kings of Edom, etc. And the 10th horn. Okay. So he says the descent into Egypt alludes to our present exile at the hand of the fourth beast, which represents Rome. So everything fitting into what we've built so far. He says, for it was Jacob's sons themselves who, by the sale of their brother Joseph, caused their going down there. Who caused the exile? The Jews themselves caused the exile. Joseph's brothers caused the exile through the sale of Joseph. Jacob, moreover, went there on account of the famine, thinking to find relief with his son in the house of his son's friend. For Pharaoh loved Joseph and considered him as a son. So Jacob's like, oh, it'll be totally cool going to Egypt because they love us over there. Look, we're best friends. My son Joseph saved the Egyptians, and they just love Jews over there. It's going to be gewaldig, as we say in Yiddish. It's going to be fantastic, amazing, huge. It's going to be huge. It was their hope to ascend from there as soon as the famine would cease in the land of Canaan. Okay, so we'll make a little friends with the Egyptians while it's good for us. We'll get whatever benefits we get. And when the famine's over, we'll go back to business as usual. I'm skipping a little bit. He says, but then they did not come up. They did not immediately ascend out of Egypt at the end of the famine, did they? But instead, the exile prolonged itself upon Jacob, and he died there. And his bones ascended from there, accompanied by all the elders and courtiers of Pharaoh, who instituted severe lamentation for him. So he's going through the events. Israel descended, stayed there a long time, died there, and only his bones were brought back to the land of Israel, accompanied by Pharaoh and his people, and they mourned over them. So what is that? What does that amount to? He says, our relationship with our brothers, Rome and Edom, brothers, because Jacob and Esau are brothers. Our relationship with our brothers, Rome and Edom, is similar. We ourselves have caused our falling into their clutches, as they made a covenant with the Romans, meaning the Jews made a covenant with the Romans. Now I'm skipping ahead a little bit. I'm just reading the highlighted sections. And the exile has exceedingly prolonged itself over us, like Egypt, with its end, unlike the other exiles, being unknown. We do not know when this exile will end, he said. We are in it as the dead who say, our bones are dried up, we are completely cut off. And that's from the prophecy of the dry bones in Ezekiel. He says, we Jews are shriveling and withering away in the exile like dead and dry bones. Now, again, I've spoken about this before, but, you know, the state of Jewry in the time of Ramban, I don't know what it was, but he compares it to dead bones. I've made the statement on this platform before that the state of the Jewish people today is horrific. I don't know if I said it here in this forum. I feel like I did, but there is a aside from the recent Holocaust and the killing of 6 million Jews, there is a spiritual Holocaust that is going on in the Jewish people with rampant assimilation and intermarriage, where the vast majority of Jews are disaffiliating with their heritage. If there was ever a time where the Jews were like a rotting corpse, it's our time. And this the Ramban writing in the 13th century. So again, he says, we are in it as the dead in the exile, as the dead who said, bones are dried up, we are completely cut off. But in the end, they will bring us from all the nations as an offering to the eternal. Now, this in Hebrew, the words are V'ya'alu otanu mikol ha'amim min chala Hashem. They will bring us up from all the nations as an offering to God, which is a paraphrase, more or less, of Isaiah 66, the final chapter of Isaiah, which is about the end times. And it's like the nations themselves will bring us and deposit us back into the land of Israel, he says. Now, I think there's two ways to read this. He also could mean when it says, V'ya'alu otanu, they'll bring us up. The language is similar to what's called a korban olah in Hebrew, which means a burnt offering. It's called olah, something which rises up because it's totally burnt up on the altar. So the way that the Jewish people would be wiped out to a certain degree in the exile, it would be almost like the nations are offering us up like a burnt offering. So I don't know if he means this with a negative connotation or a positive connotation, but I think either one could be understood, that they'll bring us back to the land of Israel, and you could look at that as present events with the UN resolution to create the state of Israel, and however else you want to interpret it. Or it could be a little sadder that they like sacrificed us like a burnt offering. But he says this, and they will be in deep sorrow. So in other words, Pharaoh brought Jacob's bones back to the land of Israel to be buried, and they mourned. So he says the nations are going to send us back to the land of Israel, and they will be in deep sorrow as they will behold our glory. When the nations see the glory of Israel in the time of the redemption, they will mourn over it. They will not be happy for us. It will make them sad to see us in a state of glory. And we will see the vengeance of the eternal. He says, may he raise us that we may live in his presence. So he said, in other words, he's saying at the end, if you read the Hebrew, the connotation is like, may we merit to live long enough to see this come true. But it's so interesting when I read these words of the Ramban, and I think of all the, what they call the useful idiots that protest against Israel. When Israel's winning, they can't take it. They lose their minds, right? They go out of their mind when Israel is winning. It's like, no, it's not okay for Israel to win. It's only okay when Jews die. But for Jews to be winning against Hezbollah, right? When the Hezbollah guys are blowing up, their pages are blowing up, and their cell phones are blowing up, right? The crazies on the hard left are losing their minds. Oh, how could the Jews be doing this, right? Like they can't stand to see Israel win. When we're defeating Hamas, when we're flattening their bases, they go out of their minds, right? The enemies of the Jews mourn when they see our glory. So I read this comment, I don't know, maybe today, maybe this morning, as I was studying the weekly parsha. I told you I'm behind, but I was like, boom, this is everything we've been talking about. So when I look at this, and when I consider what we said last week, and when I consider current events of what's going on with Trump and Netanyahu and Gaza, I'm just like, everything is playing out exactly the way it's written, for better and for worse, unfortunately. So that was my introduction. We haven't even gone any further in the text, but I did feel like all those reflections were somewhat poignant in the wake of what occurred between last class and today. So I'll take any comments if people have any comments or questions, and then I'm going to jump into verse 2, maybe with one more comment beforehand. Now,
I have one comment.
Yeah.
When I was told about Trump's taking over Gaza, my question to the people who told me that was, and what happens next?
by the way, my optimistic view of this is kind of like the tariffs thing. Trump was going like full chicken off the cliff. I'm going to tariff Canada and Mexico. And when they asked him, like, are you doing this? Is this like a pressure move? Is there something, some concession that you want? Is there anything that would get you not to do the tariffs? He's like, nope, I'm doing the tariffs. Nope, nothing. There's nothing that'll make me change my mind. The tariffs are happening. And then all of a sudden, Trudeau and what's her name, Schoenfeld or whatever, they were all bowing down and bending over backwards. And Trump will do whatever you say, right? It's like, oh, okay. By the way, maybe the tariffs could wait another month, right? I feel like he's playing chicken also with Gaza. That the whole time this war is going on with Hamas, they keep asking, what does the day after look like in Gaza? What does the day after look like in Gaza? And the Israelis are saying, we want someone to come in and govern Gaza, and we're not interested in doing it. And it can't be Hamas, and it can't be Palestinian Authority. Maybe some of the Gulf countries that we have a peace accord with could come in and they could govern Gaza. Meanwhile, none of the Arab countries want to govern Gaza. They don't want to go to this place where there's so much extremism and jihadism, and Hamas have their strongholds there. They know anyone who will try to govern there will be assassinated, will be destroyed. They've no one has any interest. It's like, no, it's your problem, Israelis. We don't want to touch it. And I feel like this is my thought, that Trump is like, okay, no problem. I'll take Gaza. It's mine. I'm going to get it. I'm going to clean this place out. I'm going to build the most beautiful, fantastic place. It's a real estate investment. It's going to be amazing. And now all of a sudden everyone's thinking Trump's going to build golf courses and hotels. And there's billions of dollars of investment. We could make so much money. Trump is going to make so much money from his investment on Gaza. We are losing out, and they're going to come in. They're going to come to Trump and say, never mind, we'll do it. We'll do it. We'll do it. And I think this is Trump's way of getting someone else to take responsibility, who until now have said they're not going to do it. I feel like this is another Trump bluff. That's my optimistic view. But said, we have suffered very greatly from bringing our friends too close, who didn't stay our friends forever and had their own interests in mind. And when Trump says America first, which he should say America first, he's the American president, but he lets you know right up front, America first. This is not Israel first. I'm coming to Gaza because America first. We're not going to put troops on the ground, right? Israel's going to do the military work. We're not investing our money. We're going to get someone else to pay for it, right? We're going to benefit. We're not doing this to be altruistic. This is America first. So they're even coming saying, look, this is America first. So they have their own interests in mind, not our interests in mind. And even if Trump is the best friend Israel ever had and stays that way for the rest of his presidential tenure, you don't know what happens next. What about Vayakom Melech Chadash? A new king arose over Egypt that did not know Joseph, and he made new decrees. So there'll be a new king over the United States of America. It says, oh, we got this property in Gaza. We don't like the Jews. Now we have a stranglehold on them, because what are they going to do? If we invite the United States in to Gaza, we will not be able to get rid of them if we ever want to. You understand what I'm
Rabbi?
Yeah.
It's Cliff, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think a whole lot of people felt exactly the way you do when they heard this, for exactly the same reasons. It occurred to me that another example of what you're talking about is what happened in France in recent decades, where Israel made basically a deal with France to sell them nuclear technology, or not sell them, to give them nuclear technology in response to Mirage fighters. And what ended up happening was that de Gaulle made a promise to Israel to sell them those fighter planes, which they desperately needed in order to be able to survive the repeated wars of the Arab countries against them. Later on, de Gaulle just simply decided that he wasn't going to keep his promise. He just said, I'm not going to give you those Mirage fighters. You can't have them. So every time we make friends, like you say, every time we trust in that way, it can really, really backfire on us in very serious ways.
Right. So right now, I see a lot of euphoria on the pro-Israel side of like, Trump is our savior. And I'm like, I think you're getting a little ahead of yourself.
I agree.
Because these, like we said last week from Ramban, these periods of peaceful coexistence with Edom are short-lived. And as Tom pointed out in the comments, right? As you said, we are one generation away from a changed anti-Israel America. So whatever happens after is a problem. I told you about the statistics that the young people in this country overwhelmingly are anti-Israel. And those young people are going to take over this country in one generation. And then America is not going to be the friend to Israel that it was. So, and then they're going to have a territory on mainland Israel. You know, someone said this comment to me, better the enemy you know than the enemy you don't know. Now, again, right now, America, thank God, is a really good friend to Israel. We're very grateful to that. We are very good. But we have to be a little bit forward thinking. We have to, not even forward thinking, we have to be a little backward thinking. Look at history. Look at history. Don't get entangled in alliances that will bite you later. So we're very happy that America is so pro-Israel right now. We don't know what's going to happen later. We should say to Trump, thank you for your support. We'll handle it from here. It's okay. Right? So, you know, maybe Bibi Netanyahu is a very strong, influential Israeli politician, but I feel he's giving in a little too much over here. But it looks very good right now. But when you learn it in the context of everything we're looking at now from these sources, it's very scary. It's very scary. So, okay, I think we should do the text because we're about 45 minutes past the hour. So
Rabbi,
I wanted
can
to
I just-
introduce with that remark because I saw it just today, I think, and it was like very relevant, very relevant. Someone has a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. If we remember the Babylonian conquest, Israel tried to get the Egyptians under Necho to help. He promised he would, and then he turned his back.
Right. So that's the story of history, is that you know, friends today, not necessarily friends tomorrow.
Yeah.
There's a lot to say, but let's take a look at the text. Okay, next slide. Verse 2. Okay. I'll read it in Hebrew, we'll translate it, and we'll see what the commentaries say over here. Verse 2 says as follows. Hine katon nisaticha bagoyim bozuyata me'od. Now in the English it says, behold, I make these small among the nations. Now I had to modify this translation a little bit. I should have modified it more. I took it from the JPS, the old JPS. So hine is behold. Katon means small. Okay. Nitaticha literally means I have given you, but it can be euphemistically meaning I have made you, and that's the correct usage here. Behold, small, I have made you bagoyim, among the nations. Now here I put it in the present tense, and I'm going to tell you why I did that. I don't remember what tense they had it in, but I made it present tense for the reason I'm going to tell you. Then it says, Bazui ata me'od. Bazui, he translates as despised. It's not quite despised. Bazui means like lowly and derided. Okay. Bazui ata is you. Me'od means very much. So Bazui ata me'od means you are, or were, depending on the tense, very derided. Okay. Now, there's a whole question among the commentators what tense this should be in, and that's why I made it present, because I want it to be it could be understood past or future. So I made it ambiguous. But let's go on to the commentaries. Okay, so again, here's the prophet speaking now it seems directly to Edom, and says, I have made you small among the nations. You are greatly, you are very lowly. You're very derided. Okay. Any questions on that translation? Okay, let's go on. Stop me at any time. So here's what some of the commentaries say about that phrase. Okay, it says, why is God saying to Edom, I have made you small? So here Rashi, I synopsize this commentary over here, says that we find that Esav, the progenitor of this nation, is called the big one, Gadol. He's called the big son of the older son of Jacob and Rivka, Beno Hagadol, the older son, or Beno Hagadol, her older son, his older son. Gadol is the word used in the text for Esav, that he's called large, and Jacob is called the younger son. But God is saying, despite you being firstborn and therefore technically older or bigger, and Jacob being second and therefore smaller, in my eyes, you're actually the small one because you're such a wicked low life. So on a spiritual level, you're the small one. Forget the physical appearance of bigness. In the reality that counts, which is the level of the spirit, you are actually the smaller. Okay. Now, again, nitaticha, which literally means I have given you, means I have rendered you, I have made you, right? So I've made you small, I've made you lowly. Like the parallel phrase, bazui atamaod, you are very bazui, you are very lowly, you're very derided. Okay, that's how Rashi interprets it. Any questions on that? Okay, I'm going to keep going. Interrupt me anytime. Here in this slide, again, I know the text is small, but I'm gonna read you what it says over here. The other commentators understand this not to be a reference to Esav himself, but rather to the nation of Edom that was in ancient Idumea, that was a neighboring country of Israel to the south. And it says, I made you small, meaning in the beginning, your beginnings was very small and weak. The nation of Edom was not an impressive nation in the ancient world, and it was conquered many times by many different peoples. It really was unimpressive. So, however, in other words, the prophet is rebuking Edom. Edom, which is now the Roman Empire or the Western Christian civilization, is now so great and mighty and powerful and dominating the world. And therefore, it's very arrogant. And so the prophet is giving him a little bit of a slap in the face, says, don't forget your beginnings. Don't think you're such a big shot. Remember, you started off as a tiny, insignificant, weak country in the Middle East. Okay. So this past tense reference is a reference to their history. Radak, on the other hand, understands it as a reference to the future, that nitaticha, I have made you, is a prophecy from the standpoint of the prophet who's sort of seeing the future, like he's looking from the future back in time, and he's describing it as though it happened in the past, even though it hasn't yet happened, because he's describing it from a future vantage. And he says, behold, I have made you small, meaning despite your largeness or largesse as the Western empire of civilizations, you will be reduced to nothing in the end of days. And that's what it means. So it's either a reference to the future, it's a reference to the past, to the individual of Esav as being lowly in spiritual stature, or a reference to the nation of Edom, which was small and weak in its beginning. And either way, it's meant to humble this haughty nation of Edom that's going to be dominating the world for most of its history. Okay, any questions on that? Okay,
One
next.
question.
Yeah.
Question. Wasn't Herod originally Idumean?
Yes. Herod was an Idumean. In fact, this is mentioned in some of the commentaries, that we never had anything but saris. We never had anything but trouble from the Idumeans, from Edom, because the Herod was an Idumean. The Idumeans were still a people in the Second Temple period, and they were conquered by the Hasmonean kings. The Hasmonean Jewish kings, who were priests, conquered the Idumeans. I think it was either John Hyrcanus or Alexander Jannaeus, who conquered them and forcibly converted them. Forcibly converted the Idumeans. Now, we don't forcibly convert. But this was done inappropriately, improperly. And Herod was a product. He was a Jewish Idumean convert, but he was a very wicked psychopath, and he did a lot of damage to the fabric of the Jewish people in his governance over Israel. But that is correct. So the commentaries mention that even those Edomites that we absorbed into our nation were also a tool of our destruction. Now, again, notwithstanding that Obadiah was an Edomite convert, but he converted properly, in the proper way, not forcibly. So that was like a big mistake. Again, it was a big mistake for us to kind of pull them on, yank the Edomites in to join ranks with us. Okay. Someone's asking, why Edom is Christian West? Isn't Edom same Esau, same the father of Arabs, where they were in Jordan, the Seir Mount area, and his princes and dukes according to the Bible? Yes. So Phelps fan for good, whoever you are, we covered all this in last week's class. So go to class number 3 and you'll see the answer to that. Okay. A Golden Gun mentions that Ishmael is father of the Arabs as opposed to Esav, and that is somewhat true. Yeah, that's correct. That is correct. Okay. There's what to say, but maybe not for now. Save it for another time. Okay. Finally, we have Malbim. Malbim, again, we mentioned this commentary is a relatively later commentary. He's a 19th century commentator, Meir Leib ben Yechiel Michal, and he writes that like this. He does this in his commentary. His commentary attempts to weave these seemingly disparate verses together into sort of a flowing narrative. He does it very, very effectively. He says, basically, we need to look at the relationship between verse 1 and verse 2. In verse 1, we hear that there's a whole coalition of nations gathering together to make war against Edom. So in response to this Shemua, right, we heard, the response is a question of like, really? A coalition of nations is coming to make war against Edom? Why should that be? Isn't Edom just a small, insignificant nation? Right? In other words, Ovadyah is saying his prophecy in the time when Edom was a small, relatively insignificant nation, and yet he's prophesying that a coalition of nations is going to come to destroy them. Why would a coalition of nations be necessary to fight against the Edom that he was aware of when it was, in his time, such a small nation? So he's going to yet prophesy what will be the future of what is the present nation of Edom. But he says, a whole coalition of nations, verse 1, is coming to make war against you. But behold, you are but a small nation. You're very lowly. Why would it be necessary for a coalition of nations to come against you? So this verse is kind of like a foil for the first verse, prophesying a future time when a coalition of nations will come against Edom. Edom in this time is only a small nation, right? So there seems to be some type of a contrast or tension. What's going on over here? Why is a coalition of nations coming against what appears presently to be such a small nation? And that question becomes answered in the following verses. Okay. Now we could move on to verse 3. It's more or less the end of the hour. If there's any questions or comments, I will hear them now. I'm looking at some of the chatter in the YouTube chat. Someone says, when I heard Trump's idea, my first thought that it's not good. Isn't it against the Torah anyway, as it states Israel belongs to the Jewish people? So this is an ongoing problem. It's an ongoing problem to give dominion of the land of Israel to other nations, for Israel to give dominion of the land to even the Arabs is a very questionable action. And as we see, when we do that, it only leads to suffering, which is exactly what the Torah said would happen if we would do that. So that's a very good point. So everybody's so optimistic about, oh, well, just instead of the Ishmaelites being on the land, we'll let the Edomites be on the land. What could go wrong with that? Right? It's crazy. It's crazy. What are you, nuts? Fine. So I see Golden Gun is taking on this guy in the chat about the genealogy. I don't want to get into it because we already dealt with it. So anyway, what do you think? It's 8:57. We could call the class early. Because I don't think in 3 minutes we're going to necessarily be able to cover. We're not going to be able to cover what I want to cover in verse 3. Verse 3 is I find it to be quite deep, and I want to give it its proper. This is verse 3. Should say verse 4. I have to fix it. I want to give it its proper respect. I'm going to give it its proper time, allotment of time next week. So this week we covered verse 2. I know it was the minority of the class that we did it, but I think the lead up, especially the comments of Ramban, were extremely important, especially in the last current events. So I took responsibility for that. I think that was worthwhile expenditure of time. Now, in general, I have another question. And as much as I'm spending time sort of outside of the actual text of the prophet, but what I feel are relevant sources, not just relevant to the text, but relevant to us regarding this whole topic and current events. I'd like to do that, and as much as I'm doing that, I'm being very, very. I'm holding back a lot, and I just want to show you. If you look at what's on my slides before verse 2, that there's this introductory one we looked at from Ramban, but I have this slide from Psalms, and this from Zechariah over here, chapter 6, and this is a medrash in Eicha Rabbah. Here's the Targum on the Book of Lamentations. There's a Rashi on Lamentations, a section. I'm going backwards a little bit. A section of the Book of Amos. All that was things that I meant to touch upon that were relevant to verse 1. And even, which we didn't get to in the class on verse 1. And even that, I was holding back a lot that I could have shared about the whole big topic of the identity of Edom as the Roman Western Christian civilization. I decided to skip it because I felt like, even though those sources are really interesting, we kind of covered what was necessary to cover, and I want to keep making progress. I moved on to verse 2. You could let me know if you prefer more tangents or fewer tangents, because even with what I'm doing now, which I'm holding back a lot, we've touched one verse in each class last time and this time, and it was a 2-part introduction before that. So I feel like I shouldn't go slower, do more tangents, as juicy and delicious and fun as they might be. But you could tell me otherwise. You could say, no, Rabbi, we want more tangents, or we want fewer tangents. I'll try. If you tell me fewer, I could try to deliver, but I don't know how successful I'll be. So anyway, that said, you let me know if you enjoy the tangents I'm taking and you don't mind, or you're good just kind of seeing the bare minimum and going ahead. Do you have any comments on that?
I'm a more tangents person myself, so I don't care if it takes 10 years. I just love this background. It's so amazing. But with respect to everybody else, I would defer to them on that. Maybe it is just best what you're doing. I don't know, but I love it.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. Tom also says, "Go deep or go home." He wants more depth as opposed to just covering ground, as they say. SF, more tangents. Tom, again, more Rebbe holes. Love all your insights. So
I mean,
I'm going to try to balance it. I'm happy that we did at least one verse today. Like, we made some progress. I think I'll sprinkle it in as we go, as long as we can at least take one step forward. Then maybe it's worthwhile to look left, look right a little bit. But I'll try to keep moving ahead. So we made some progress. We saw some really, I think, exhilarating sources, and God willing, we'll continue next Sunday.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Okay, thank you for joining, and I appreciate you all.
I thought there was somebody who wanted to say something. There was somebody that.
Yeah, I was just going to agree that I always enjoyed you going off on tangents when you were doing the Parsha on Tenech Talk. So I'm for you going off on tangents if you choose to.
Okay.
And when you were going through all that and flicking through all the screens of what you could have added, your microphone was breaking up a little bit then, but otherwise through the whole lesson, it's been really good. So,
Okay, yeah, I am concerned about the audio. We have gotten some complaints about the audio. I mentioned before the broadcast that because last week people complained about the microphone audio, I switched back to my old mic, but with a new cord, because we had complaints about this mic, which is why I switched to the other mic. But then we had complaints about that mic, so I switched back to this mic, but I changed the audio cord, hoping that it was the cord that was the problem, not the mic. But if you tell me there's still issues with the audio,
yeah, there
then
was only its very last 5 minutes. Otherwise, it was perfect. There was just when you were flicking through all those slides and saying what you could have added, that's when it played up a little bit. But through the lesson itself, it was just perfect.
Okay, I wonder why that is. So if it's tolerable for now, we'll leave it as is. But if it becomes intolerable, we're going to have to figure out another solution.
Yeah.
Have a great evening.
Fine. Everybody have a great week.
Yep. You too.
And,
You too.
be in touch. Anyone wants to send me an email, rabbi@rabbirafimollot.com.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Yaakov, I'm reading your message right now.
It's a good one.
Okay. I hear you. I think we need to be careful with our comments. I think that politicians have to play the political game. Sometimes you have to say what you have to say. But we should be balanced about everything. Shouldn't be too euphoric this way or that way. Realize that Hashem's in control. We just have to play our part the right way.
Yeah, I saw that yesterday as well. And I also saw an article by Yishai Fleischer, and he was sort of saying he should be against it. But after listening to it, he thought it was okay, because if Israel tried to do what Trump says he's going to do, the whole world would really come down on Israel about it. But I thought, not being able to parallel like you did with Rome, doing the same thing with Rome, I still had my doubts that it was the right thing to do, because, as you said, once the Americans are there, you're not going to get them out.
Yeah. So again, I thought it was incredible that last class we were like, oh, how does America fit into all this? They're our great friends, And I said what I said then. But then when this happened, that Trump's like, oh, yeah, America is going to own Gaza. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Listen, I'll make another comment. This is a very sad comment. Trump, met with the hostage families from the Hamas hostages. And this woman got up, one of the hostage family ladies, to talk about her family and how much she wanted Trump to help them get their family back. She said to Donald Trump, what if you would have replaced Trump's name with God? This would have been one of the most beautiful and fervent prayers that a Jew could utter. It's saying, President Trump, we believe in you. President Trump, we have no help other than you. President Trump, only you can bring our relatives back. You have the power. You can do anything, President Trump. We put our faith in you. We put our trust in you. Please, President Trump, bring our family back. We believe in you. We know you could do it. We love you, President Trump, right? This is an Israeli woman. And I'm like, how does a Jew utter such words about a flesh and blood being?
Yeah.
That's what you say to Hashem. You say, Hashem, you have the power. We trust you. We believe in you. You can do it. Please do it. You don't put that kind of, you don't attribute that kind of power to a human being. It's a sad statement of the state of spiritual affairs among Israelis that are really disassociated from religion. Most of them, it's a mostly secular country. And now Donald Trump is their new God. And
Yeah.
I think Hashem doesn't appreciate that when his people turn a human political leader into a bigger God than him. And I don't think that kind of an attitude towards Donald Trump, as great as a friend to Israel as he may be, is going to be a winning attitude for the Jewish people. So like you said, Yishai Fleischer, he says, if Israel tried to do it, the world would go crazy. So maybe we should let Donald Trump do it.
Yeah.
That's the wrong attitude.
Yeah.
The attitude is, where is your faith? Why are you worried about what the world is going to think, what the world is going to do? Don't you have God on your side? Now, I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. But if you believe it's the right thing to do, then what are you worried about? I think we could debate if it's the right thing to do. I think we could debate if Israel should or should not, so to speak, clean out Gaza, should or should not occupy Gaza. I think that's all debatable. It's a political discussion, it's a religious discussion. I think all sides we're open to hearing. But if you believe from a religious perspective, which is what Yishai Fleischer claims he does, he's a right-wing religious Zionist.
Yeah.
Then what are you worried about? Oh, the world is going to be against us, so we need Donald Trump. That's the wrong attitude.
Well, the world's already like that at the moment, isn't it? Pretty much.
The world
so.
is like that, and the world has always been like that, and it always will be like that. And that's what the Ramban just told us,
Yeah.
right? They're going to lose their minds when Israel wins.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is. They're going to mourn. They're going to mourn. When Pharaoh brought Jacob's bones back to the land of Israel, he cried. Says the Ramban, when we come back to our land and we are restored to our former glory, the nations of the world will cry because it'll hurt them to see the Jews actually living prosperously, peacefully, successfully, securely, and strongly. That is painful to our enemies. Yeah, that's the way it always was, and that's the way it's always going to be until, as the Ramban says, God exacts his vengeance from our enemies. And as he says at the end, may we live long enough to see it. Amen.
Yeah.
Anyway, on that happy note, everyone should have a wonderful evening.
Yes. And stop
And a
trusting.
good week. Be well.
And stop trusting in a man.
What's that?
And stop trusting in a man.
And stop trusting in a man. That's right. We should appreciate
Yes.
his support. We should be grateful. A Jew has to be grateful. And we should be peaceful, and we should encourage good relations between Israel and all nations. We are not a belligerent nation. We're not an aggressive nation. We're not a warlike nation. But we have to know who's really in charge, right? It's not Donald Trump. So anyway, everyone should have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Good night, Rabbi.
All right, good night.